Welcome, everyone, to today's session of Hot Topics in Nutrition: How to Feel Full on Fewer Calories While Also Improving Your Diet, led by Hillary Wright. This program is hosted by the Blum Resource Center. Over at the Blum, we are grateful to the nutrition team for this continued partnership. The recording of this session will be posted on our Blum YouTube playlist and our Blum Digital Resource Center. For those of you watching live, if you have any questions related to today's program, please feel free to utilize the chat feature throughout the session. At the end of the session, your questions in the chat will be used to moderate our question and answer. If you have any other questions or would like more information about resources and programs offered through the Blum, please visit our website at www.dana-farber.org/resource center or email us at blum_center@dfci.harvard.edu. Thank you all for being here, and I will now pass the workshop over to you, Hillary.
Thank you, Sierra. So today's workshop, how to feel fuller on fewer calories while also improving your diet. The goal of this was to show the overlap between strategies to help with weight management, whether someone's trying to reduce their weight or gain weight, and the guidelines for diet, lifestyle, and cancer survivorship. Um, I think the more we can make this not complicated and focus on some very targeted issues, like specifically things to add to your diet, is a lot more productive than the usual or common nutrition information that we see online, which is all about taking things away. So today we're going to talk about caloric density. It's sometimes called energy density. It's a very technical term for what kinds of things can we fill up on at meals that will improve the quality of our diet, help us feel full without loading us down with too many calories. So the study of this caloric density, which I'll be describing to you some of the research done in this area, it's an evidence-based strategy for weight loss and maintenance. It can also be used to consistently boost calorie intake to promote weight gain, which is common in our oncology population, particularly those actively going through treatment. These guidelines also align with the diet and lifestyle recommendations of the American Institute for Cancer Research and the World Cancer Research Fund, for which there are other videos in Blum that review these in more detail. And it consistently increases dietary fiber intake to nurture a healthy gut microbiome, which we now understand is involved in many aspects of promoting good health and reducing disease, including cancer. So to just say a little bit about that before we move forward, we now understand that a really important part of our immune system comes from the compounds that are generated by the healthy microbes that live in our gut that we call our microbiome. We call those microbes probiotics. Those probiotics are, we now understand, are as healthy, are as important to human health as our organ systems. So these healthy microbes need fiber to thrive and flourish. So those probiotics eat prebiotics, which are fibers from plant foods, and produce as a byproduct countless compounds that act as anti-inflammatories and antioxidants and help the body to detoxify and provide about 70% of our immune system. So any strategies that can kind of do double duty, triple duty of decreasing the caloric density of the meals that we're eating for weight control while also increasing elements that support our immune system is nothing but good. So the science of caloric density is a lot of it is based on the work of a nutrition researcher at Penn State named Barbara Rolls. And she's authored a couple of cookbooks. This one is The Ultimate Volumetrics Diet. So this is available on Amazon and other places. And basically her research has really been primarily focusing on what makes people feel full and stop eating. So she's a satiety researcher. And she's been doing research in the subject for decades, many of the studies originally done on college students, where she was curious as to how could they experiment with the foods that were offered at the cafeteria at Penn State to give the students what they wanted, enjoyable food, while also reducing the caloric density. And so that is what her research and recommendations are originated in. So, what is caloric density? Why should we care? So, for decades, we've been trying to understand the complexities of calorie intake, how it affects weight. And the primary areas of focus have been the macronutrients: carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Those are the three nutrients that provide calories. Carbohydrates and proteins provide 4 calories per gram. Fat provides 9 calories per gram. But caloric density doesn't just focus on those. It focuses primarily on how many calories are in every bite of food that I'm going to eat at a meal. And we know that the calories per bite is one of the most important factors affecting calorie intake, as each bite of food we take in contributes to a feeling of fullness. So the more these bites of food could be filling, but less calorically dense, the more we can feel satiated on less food volume. So in the past, I've been doing this for decades, and I remember in the early days, the focus on, what about calories should be added or subtracted to help people with weight management. And in the early days, it was fat. Then, for the last 20 years, it's been carbohydrates. Currently, protein is having a moment. I think everybody has noticed protein is being added to everything, including many foods that are actually not nutritionally rich. It's kind of the way the food industry often approaches these opportunistic moments. And each of these macronutrients has a role to play in providing good nutrition. But if we assume that most people with a healthy appetite are getting adequate amounts of fats, carbohydrates, and proteins, what else can we sort of manipulate in order to help us feel full on fewer calories? So the research shows that lowering the caloric density of foods can help you feel full while eating fewer calories. So a caloric density, though, can be utilized in either direction. It can be utilized to either curb caloric intake for weight loss or concentrate calories to increase weight. But what lowers the caloric density of a food more than anything else? And that would be water, because water takes up space in the stomach. It expands our stomach. We know that part of what sends a feeling of fullness to the brain that we've eaten and we can stop is that the stomach stretches out. We have these stretch receptor cells. And we know that water and foods that have a high water content are very effective at improving a feeling of fullness without a lot of calories. So, factors that affect food intake are complicated, and they are kind of psychological, sensory, different kinds of aspects of our relationship with food, like sight, smell, taste, environment, mood. I think we all know that those things can affect how susceptible we are to eating certain foods, eating at a certain pace, and eating possibly too much. But Dr. Roll's research has found that the big three influences of how much food we eat at a sitting are portion size, variety, and what they call in the research energy density, what we're calling caloric density. So there's been a lot of research devoted to trying to understand how to moderate these influences to help people with weight control, because we are so bombarded nonstop with food messages that are often trying to kind of influence us and sell us something that is not necessarily best for our health. So, not surprisingly to anybody, studies show the larger the portion of a food, the more people will eat. I think everybody knows that. When we go to a restaurant and we're served food, it's almost always larger than what we might serve at home. And for that reason, people are more prone to eating more calories when they eat out in restaurants. And this appears to be particularly significant when eating more calorie-dense foods, including larger portions, things that are heavier in fat, things that can easily override our built-in biological messaging for feeling full. So again, when we're in a setting where food is abundantly available in large portions, it's much easier to eat beyond our needs. So given this known effect of large food portions on caloric intake and weight gain, much research has gone in to try to deal with this portion issue. Next. So one of the strategies, and I've actually recommended this at times to people, and I think it can have some benefit, but the research generally shows that eating off of small plates has little to no effect on how much people eat. So I know a lot of these research studies use buffets. So in this study, found that small plates at a buffet just encourage multiple trips to the buffet. I mean, who hasn't done that? I do think there is some potential benefit to eating off of smaller plates at home because those of us of a certain age remember when plates were not as big as they are now, and the larger the plate, the more people tend to eat. Um, there has been studies on reducing the portion size served. So when people are served smaller portions of food, they tend to be satisfied with less. The problem is, particularly in a consumer restaurant setting, there's a lot of pushback for meals eaten out of the house because of this third bullet here. We are a post-depression era generation, and we like a lot for a little. So if people are going to be incentivized to eat less food, they're not going to want to pay as much. So this presents like a big conundrum for food. I found myself wondering, what if somebody opened a restaurant and marketed it as more reasonable portions, and it probably would be a fail because of the way we tend to approach this wanting a lot for little. It is interesting that people don't like to waste food, so this might be a post, World War II era mindset as well. And that if, research has been done to try to make it easier for people to bring food home when they're eating out in a community setting. I do have one patient that I can recall that used to bring a Tupperware to restaurants with her, and she would immediately pack away half of her dinner and bring it home. Needless to say, that takes a high degree of discipline and not something that is widely practiced. Next. Variety is another one. I mean, we know when we are surrounded by a lot of different kinds of foods, we like to enjoy a lot of different kinds of foods. The interesting thing about variety is many studies have shown that the appeal of a food that has just been eaten declines more than foods that have not been eaten yet. So what that means basically is if the sensory properties of foods are very different from the ones already eaten, they remain palatable or maybe even rated as more pleasant. So this third research finding really fleshes that out because what's drawn the most attention in this area has been the appeal of sweet foods. Sweet foods can remain equally palatable or even taste better after eating a savory or a salty food. So will be eaten when available. So again, most of us can appreciate you may have had a meal at one point that was very starchy or high in protein or on the saltier side and felt completely satiated with that sense. Could you hit forward again, Sierra? But what a lot of this can explain is how we always find room for dessert, even after eating a very rich meal, because the sensation of sweet is a different variety sensation than fat or protein. Next. Yep, we always seem to have room for dessert. Next. So this kind of tries to pull this together. This is a quote from Dr. Rolls. Sensory specific satiety promotes consumption of a variety of foods and helps ensure the diet is nutritionally balanced. One way to interpret this is to appreciate that human beings are supposed to be attracted to a lot of different taste sensations because for our ancestors, it was really important for survival to not be picky, to be open to eating anything that was edible in order to satisfy the need for calories, protein, and total nutrients. The problem is that same tendency towards really enjoying variety in the current food environment can contribute to overeating. So the variety of available foods and beverages is one of the most consistent influences on calorie intake and affects people regardless of whether they're struggling with their weight or they're not, regardless of whether they're old or a child. The more foods we have available, the more we're going to eat them. So for this reason, dietitians are often encouraging people to be mindful of the types of foods that you have readily available to yourself in your house. So healthy eating success is never going to be, I can surround myself with loads of delectable food and somehow not want them. It also doesn't mean that wanting them makes somebody a bad person. It just means we have to understand our vulnerability to be attracted to a variety of food. So if we populate our inner food space, our house, our car, our office with the foods we want to be eating, and make the foods that we want to be limiting at least a little bit of a stretch, maybe perhaps something you would enjoy a serving of outside your house without having it in your house calling your name because your brain likes variety, that is just one behavior change that can enhance the odds of being able to control calories. So it's helpful if the variety is one presented are a variety of fruits and vegetables because those add nutrition and are mostly water and are fiber. Not so great when the variety consists of fatty foods and sweets. So this brings us down to the third influence, caloric density. So given that water has 0 calories per gram, adding foods that are mostly water, like vegetables and fruits, to recipes, meals, snacks, and I'm going to give you lots of recommendations on this in a minute, can lower the caloric density while still helping us feel full because they also, as I mentioned before, like more calorie dense proteins and carbohydrates and fats, these foods also stretch out your stomach and contribute to that chemical feeling of fullness. Adding more fruits and vegetables is one of the tenets of the healthy eating guidelines for cancer survivorship from the American Institute for Cancer Research and the World Cancer Research Fund, who recommend filling 2/3 or more of your plate with colorful plant foods, such as vegetables, fruits, whole grains, nuts, seeds, and beans, with the remaining 1/3 of the plate being protein sources like seafood, poultry, lean meat, plant sources of protein, nuts, and seeds. Those are kind of, and beans are sort of overlaps between plant foods and proteins. But multiple studies in both adults and children have found increasing the proportion of vegetables and fruits served can lower the calories consumed at a meal, particularly if they're substituting for something higher in calories. So, for example, serving a second serving of vegetables in place of a double serving of a starch, for example, or an extra serving of protein, you still have a plate that's covered with food, but the caloric density goes down because of the addition of these vegetables and fruits. So 3 strategies for decreasing caloric density. Reduce fat and sugar content. This reduces calories. This is often where many people begin when they decided they want to try to lose some weight and they would like to cut out some calories. And they will notice if they reduce their sugar intake, that has multiple benefits, including reducing calories. Also, reducing fat. That doesn't mean we need to be on low-fat diets. We've already done that. Those of us who lived through the late 80s and the early 90s know that some fat is filling. But again, when we eat out a lot in particular, it becomes really difficult to appreciate how much fat is in the food that we're eating, even if it's healthy fat, like olive oil, for example. I'm going to show you some examples from a menu. Yes, olive oil is very healthy for you. It's still 120 calories per tablespoon. So being aware of fat intake and trying to trim it up where possible does help reduce calories. But the other strategies are all about adding in. So increasing vegetable and fruit content reduces calorie density, increases water content, helps us feel full. So ways to add water aside from adding fruits and vegetables are to do things like drink or consume a broth-based soup with a meal, for example. They have done studies, many of us, again, are of a certain age, and we remember the diet plans where they would say, drink a big glass of water at the start of your meal. It will help you eat less. That is for the reasons that we've been talking about here. But I think it's important to appreciate that the research shows that actually adding foods with a high water content is a lot more effective at promoting fullness than just drinking water or adding soups to your meals. Next. So what does the research tell us about does this help people eat less? And so there's been a lot of studies that have been done on this and have in fact found that it does help with portion control. But, portion control in and of itself, meaning just eat less of all the food you enjoy, often falls apart because it may not leave someone feeling satisfied. So, what Dr. Rolls tried to do in some of her research is how can we have a full plate of food and a full stomach and still feel satisfied? And so, this was one research study where they had 100 women who were advised to either reduce their fat intake or encouraged to reduce both fat and increase their intake of fruits and vegetables. So, this wasn't like a hardcore diet. There were no calorie or fat gram guidelines given. They were just told general advice. And what they found is over 1 year, those who added high water content foods like fruits and vegetables did eat fewer calories while consuming more food by weight. So there was more volume of food, largely coming from fruits and vegetables. They also reported less hunger and lost more weight, about 17 pounds, than the group that focused on eating less fat, who lost about 14 pounds. So you may say, that's not a huge difference, 14 to 17 pounds. And I agree, 3 pounds is not a ton. However, this is a 17-pound weight loss while also improving the quality of the diet, adding fiber, adding all these plant foods that are consistent with the American Institute for Cancer Research recommendations. So there's more than one benefit happening here. And when they actually analyzed what these people were eating, they both consumed less fat, in fact, about the same amount. So that kind of suggested that the primary influence at curbing calories was this increase in fruit and vegetable intake. So what are some examples of how you can do this in your day-to-day life? And I'm going to show you some pictures of things that I've actually done in my own kitchen as examples. But the first would be try maybe tossing steamed or sauteed vegetables in with pasta on your plate before covering both with sauce. So I'm going to show you some pictures of that. My mother always told me this is a strategy that she learned in Weight Watchers, probably back in the 70s, that a salad should have 5 or more ingredients. I'm lowering the bar a little bit here and saying have a salad with 3 or more veggies before a meal, plus also have a cooked vegetable with that meal. And I think the idea of having 3 to 5 different types of vegetables in a salad is that it makes it more filling, it adds texture, increases your fiber intake, and can help fill people up more. This is a common one, adding berries or other cut fruit to oatmeal, yogurt, or muffin recipes. Adjust a lasagna recipe to replace a layer of noodles with sliced vegetables like zucchini, summer squash, or eggplant. This was actually Dr. Roll's first research study at Penn State is she knew when the students came down the line, they expected a piece of lasagna, about this big. So what they did is they kept the lasagna portion the same size, but they took out a layer of noodles, they add a layer of vegetables, they changed to a low-fat ricotta cheese, and were able to trim 250 calories out of this piece of lasagna and got no complaints. You can also double or triple up vegetables in a soup, stew, taco, sandwich, casserole, slow cooker recipe. This generally requires experimenting with, what do you need to do with the seasonings to compensate with adding extra vegetables, but with a little trial and error is totally doable. Add fruits or cut vegetables to snacks. One of my favorite kind of modern day food transportation things are these bento boxes that people buy, like you would get in a Japanese restaurant. You can buy these glass or plastic bento boxes with little wells in them and take with you some sliced carrots, some sliced peppers, some berries, some cut fruit of different types. And then keep bags of frozen vegetables and fruits to toss in recipes and smoothies. I just had this conversation this morning with one of my Dana-Farber patients where we talked about frozen vegetables are considered nutritionally as good, if not better, than fresh vegetables because they flash freeze them right out of the field. They have steam fresh frozen vegetable bags that people can throw in the microwave like a bag of popcorn. Very easy to steam either fresh or frozen vegetables in a saucepan with about an inch of water and one of those metal steamer trays that kind of open in the pan like a flower. You can easily steam vegetables in 5 minutes or so, whether they're fresh or frozen. So this is a couple of examples of things that I've made in my own kitchen to show how to integrate more vegetables. So on the side, we have a plate that is pasta with chicken cacciatore. So that's the carbohydrate and the protein piece. And then the vegetable piece is a part of the plate is larger than one might ordinarily do. So if we really try to cover half the plate with vegetables, it can make it easier to be satisfied with the more calorie dense pasta and chicken on the other side. On the right side of this photo, this is a clam sauce, like a white sauce, uh, clam sauce with shrimp in it. And what I used for this recipe were zoodles. So I have a spiralizer. It's kind of fun to take a zucchini and turn it into noodles. You can buy zoodles already made. And the way I would make pasta like this is boil. This is a whole wheat linguine. And then at the very end, saute these zoodles in a little bit of olive oil and garlic. And then toss the noodles, the zoodles, and the pasta together before topping it with the sauce. So what's under the sauce is not just pasta, but pasta and vegetables. This picture on the far left is a big salad with some broccoli that was left over from the night before, some frittata, and some whole grain toast. This photograph in the middle is actually a Trader Joe's chicken tikka masala frozen dinner. So in this frozen dinner, there is chicken tikka masala, so chicken with a sauce and rice, but there are no vegetables. So if I was going to eat this frozen dinner for a meal, I would steam up some broccoli, and more often than not, it's just frozen broccoli thrown in the microwave. One thing I learned from the Steam Fresh bags is that you don't need to add water to frozen vegetables to cook them. So I will just take a glass bowl, put some frozen vegetables in there, put a plate on top of it, and zap it in the microwave. Then cook the frozen dinner and throw it on top of the broccoli. So now what we've done is we've created like a balanced plate out of a frozen dinner. And then on the right side here, we have a grilled turkey and cheese sandwich with a salad, but the salad is sizable. This picture actually was sent to me by my oldest son who lives in New York City years ago. And when I saw this picture, I thought I have definitely done something right because he, on a Sunday, cooked these two big sheet pans of chicken, ziti, and broccoli and put extra broccoli and tomatoes in his casseroles. So that's a really impressive example of advanced planning that all you need to do during the week is take some of this, put it in the microwave and zap it. But having chicken, more vegetables than is typical for a chicken broccoli ziti. And the ziti together in and of itself is a balanced plate. And this is making enough so you don't have to cook every night. But this here, I think, is a really great visual example of the difference in volume based on water content. So both of these food kind of collections are 500 calories, 30% of the calories from fat. The difference is the water content. So I think all of us can appreciate that the small amount of nuts in the pretzels goes pretty quickly. The salad, the fruit, the soup, and I believe that's a few kind of tortilla chips provide a lot more volume and therefore opportunity to feel fuller on fewer calories. Next. This is another example. 2 days worth of eating on the left, more calorically dense options, and on the right, more high water content options, both 1,575 calories. And it's pretty dramatic how much more volume of food is on the right. Next. So how do we pull this together for weight management? So portions matter, so anything that helps with portion control is going to be beneficial. Step number one there, and I can't emphasize this enough, is to eat regularly over the day, starting with breakfast, so that when you approach your next meal or snack, you're maybe hungry but not starved. When human beings are starved, we eat too much and we get around food. That's just the facts. It's primitive caveman biology that says if you go a long time without eating and your blood sugar levels start to drop, your brain will trigger you to eat beyond fullness when you finally get around food. For most of us, that is more likely to happen at night for a couple of reasons. Either somebody has been really busy during the day and has not been able to stay on top of regular eating. So by the time the evening rolls around, they're starving and high risk for eating larger portions. I also think, though, and again, I'm saying this as a woman who has worked with um, people around the issue of weight management for decades, women in particular are great dieters until about 4:30. It takes a lot of mind power to restrict. And the problem with that is 4:30 comes around and we're starved. And so I always say to people, particularly relates to carbohydrates, if you don't eat enough carbohydrates or enough total food during the day, they will come hunting for you at night. I would much rather see people get up and eat a good filling breakfast, a good filling lunch, a snack that's maybe a carbohydrate and protein like fruit and nuts, crackers and cheese, maybe a Greek yogurt when you're hungry in the afternoon, but not starved, so that when you get to dinner, you're not over hungry and at high risk for eating large portions. I've already said it, aim to eat more home prepared meals. I'll show you an example of a menu in a second. Stock your kitchen with a variety of fruits and vegetables. That means fresh, frozen, canned. If it has to be those little fruit cups packed in water or juice, it's good to have an option A, B, C. As I've already mentioned, be wary of how many snacks and sweets you make too easily available in your house. We are born with about this much willpower. Willpower doesn't get us very far at all if we're starved. So, this proactive eating, if you think of your hunger on a 0 to 10 scale, where 0 to 2 is not hungry because you just ate recently, something satisfying, and 8 to 10 is starved, you really want to be eating your next meal or snack when you're like a 5 or a 6 if you want, portion control to be more within your reach. Experiment with a variety of fruits and vegetables to see where you may be able to add them to things that you're already eating. So, say there are soups that you already make, well, add more vegetables. Maybe you already eat omelets, throw some vegetables in there. Maybe you already snack on yogurt, throw some fruit in there. So, it's really just adding in. Keeping them visible, they've done lots of studies on this. When you store fruits and vegetables where you can actually see them, you're more likely to eat them. So whether that's in a bowl on the counter or an eye level shelf in the kitchen, there are a lot more of these refrigerators with the door on the bottom these days, where the crispers are more closer to eye level so that you can actually see what's in your refrigerator. But it can make a big difference. I love this as like an internet meme thing, which I'm generally not a big fan of. But there's a saying online that says, eat what you want, add what you need. So most people, when they think about what are they having for a meal, we first mention the protein. We second mention the starchy thing. The vegetable piece or any fruits tend to come along as the last thing we'll mention. So if you just say, these are the kinds of meals I like, I'm going to try to offset that extra portion by adding more vegetables and fruits to my meals, then you're still getting what you want, but you're adding what you need. Next. I just wanted to share this restaurant menu, and I have a lot of admiration. This is from Grill 110. They provide the nutrition information right on the menu, which is very brave of them. And on a first pass on this menu, somebody who's trying to eat healthy, they may say, you know what, I'm not going to eat the fish and chips because I know that's fried and fried food is high in calories. And it is. It's 1,130 calories. So that same person, particularly if they didn't have the information in front of them, may say, you know what, salmon's really healthy for me. I'm going to have the salmon. So this is Thai sesame salmon that has a bang bang sauce in it and sesame seeds. At 1,160 calories, it's actually a little bit more caloric than the fish and chips. And in fact, the least caloric thing on this menu is the ahi tuna noodle bowl. I've encountered many people in my life that would look at the noodles and say, noodles are carbs, I'm not going to eat them. It's by far the least caloric thing on this menu. But most menus don't have the information front and center, which is why eating out in restaurants makes portion control really difficult. So big kudos to Grill 110. Next. Sometimes the goal, though, is the opposite. We spend a lot of time trying to help people increase their calories at Dana-Farber. So ways to add calories to a meal or a snack is to add a third of an avocado. That's 100 calories. A couple teaspoons of oil or butter will add 80 calories. An eighth of a cup of nuts will add 100 calories. Tablespoon of any kind of nut butter, about 100 calories. And a quarter cup of trail mix is about 120. So every time you eat a meal or a snack, every time the fork comes to your mouth, if you can add things with fat to them, it will increase the caloric density, which may be your goal if you're trying to gain weight. Next. So I know that can be a little bit of a challenging concept to get in the beginning, but I think hopefully the examples give some ideas of how to actually implement this so that you have the multiple effect of lowering your caloric density, increasing your fiber intake, eating more fruits and vegetables, nuts, seeds, beans are all excellent additions as well. So you're improving the quality of your diet, aligning your eating with the cancer survivorship recommendations while consuming fewer calories and hopefully feeling full.
Thank you so much, Hillary. While people are thinking of their questions, I just want to say thank you for that program. And I especially liked the actual picture references to the foods that you eat. I think that's very helpful and great to see a visual of. As I mentioned earlier, the session was recorded and it will be posted on our Blum YouTube playlist. So please keep an eye out for that. Thank you to all of our attendees that joined, and thank you, Hillary, for this great presentation.